You know, fatherlessness has become so normal that we don't see the depth of the void and the damage that it's causing in our homes, communities, and society. And those are the words of my guest today, Jonathan Lewis. Jonathan lost his dad in a tragic accident when he was in his mid-teens. Jonathan, welcome to 100 Huntley Street.
Thank you, Greg.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
So tell me about your dad growing up in Nova Scotia.
Well, my dad was I even reference it in my book. He was a classic 1970s kind of guy who loved Dirty Harry and, you know, Outlaw Josie Wales and Clint Eastwood, and was torn between an understanding of God and a deep desire to serve him, but at the same time, that John Wayne kind of idea of what manhood was and masculinity was. And so I had these mixed messages coming at me from my old man, and certainly with a lot of love behind them, but yeah, he was an interesting character, gregarious and bigger than life.
So back in 1991, and again, you talk about your dad not being maybe, you know, the warm and fuzzy kind of guy, but he started to tell you not long before the accident would occur, around Father's Day, that he loved you.
I can really honestly only ever remember that one time, and that was actually exactly 7 days before he drowned. And I don't know what was going on in his heart, other than I know there was a spiritual awakening taking place in my dad. I could see it. Certainly looking back, we could all see it, his friends and my mom and my sisters. And I don't know if he had a premonition that something was coming or what it was, but what I do know is the memories of my dad being soft towards me and my mom and my sisters were more imprinting on me than all the years of the John Wayne kind of fatherhood experience that I had. And when I, now raising my own daughters, realized, okay, what do I want them to experience? I'd much rather them hear me say I love them too much, which I know I do. I tell them I love them all the time, constantly. And I think, you know, really it's me trying to make sure that I give them a dose of a dad who's engaged in more ways than one.
I don't think you can ever tell your kids you love them, you know, enough.
No.
So let's go back to June 1991. You and your dad are going to do a dad-son thing. You're going to go scuba diving.
Yeah. So my mom and my younger sister and my dad and I decided to head out, and we're a big baseball family. I played competitive baseball at the time. I was playing for the provincial team for Nova Scotia. My dad played a lot of competitive ball, and he said, we're not gonna do baseball today. There's no double headers for either one of us. We're gonna head to the ocean, which if you live in Nova Scotia is pretty much half an hour in any direction. And my mom and dad were divers. They were certified, so they said, you know, we'll do some diving, and Jonathan and his younger sister can hang out. And my sister was 12 at the time. And mom did one dive with dad and then decided she didn't have it in her to do another dive. They hadn't dove for a while, so he wanted me to come with him. I didn't dive, I actually snorkeled. I talk about that in my book, where I had weights and I was free diving, so anybody who's a free diver would know what that means. But with a set of weights on and a good set of lungs, you can get down 20, 30, 40 feet. I mean, the guys that really do it go 200 plus feet. But you know, it was nothing to free dive down with him, and we were gathering flounder, so he's spearfishing flounder, and he got into some trouble. I had surfaced. He made a controlled ascent, which in the diving world means you're exhaling as your bubbles come up, you're exhaling out so that your lungs don't explode.
And he was doing it properly, by the way.
Totally.
There's nothing that
even now I'm a certified diver. I have tons all over the world now. I certainly have a love for the sport, despite what I went through in terms of the PTSD that I had to deal with after the fact. But there was nothing to suggest to me even now, looking back on it, that he was in any kind of trouble. And when he got to the surface, my dad was anybody who knows me knows I inherited this from him, but always carrying on. You're never quite sure if he was serious or there was a joke at your expense happening, and it was often after the fact when you realized what had transpired. And so I thought he was carrying on with me on the surface, and but what he had done was he had snapped my mask off my face, and I had a bloody nose as a result. And that's when I realized something was wrong, but also was also very frustrated with him because I couldn't see, I couldn't clear my mask, I had to have it off. And at this point, there's gear floating everywhere in the North Atlantic. Even on a calm day, you'll have 2 or 3 meter swells. So it's nothing for a 6 or 7 foot wave to separate you unless you're holding on to each other. And sure enough, he went over the next wave. And when I came over the crest of that wave, he was already gone under the surface. And What ensued after that was a desperate recovery attempt to try and get my dad out of the water.
And you, I mean,
was
you yourself
unsuccessful.
almost drowned
Yeah.
as a result.
Yeah, so at one point, I thought, okay, I can hold him up. He's got something wrong with his gear. Maybe he can troubleshoot it. So I swam under him, and I was holding him on the surface and kicking as a 135-pound, 15-year-old kid with everything I was worth. And by the time I came to the surface, I was exhausted. My own lungs were full of water. I look at it now and I'm like, why didn't he drop his weight belt? Why didn't he inflate his BCD? Of course, I struggled with the guilt of not having the foresight to do that myself all through my 20s.
But you were a 15-year-old kid too.
Yeah.
I mean,
but tell that to the 19-year-old kid 4
I
years
know when
later.
you're looking back,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
he's taken by paramedics to the hospital.
Yeah.
And then you're given word that he didn't survive.
Yeah.
And you want to go see him one last time. Your mother was not really maybe for that, but you just felt you had
No.
to say goodbye. Or?
Yeah, my mom certainly wanted to see her husband, and it was a bit of a challenge there. But I said to her, I have to have some kind of closure. I mean, the last time I saw him, I was dragging him up on the beach with 2 other divers, and I just couldn't believe that he was gone. It's anybody who's lost someone in a tragedy would know exactly what I mean. It's surreal. I can remember every minute of the drive in with an RCMP officer driving my mother's car and the ambulance in front of us and praying, like, nothing's beyond you, Lord. Please don't take my dad, right? And so I had to have that closure. And I remember, I haven't shared this with a lot of people, so it's interesting that we're having this conversation now, but I laid over his body in this post-op surgical room where, there's just gear everywhere. Like, you would have had an ER room just working on him, and they've called him. And I just cried and I said, Lord, take anything, but don't take my dad. Yeah. And it was a new chapter. I had whatever lessons he was going to teach me that were good, and I had the bad lessons, and I had to sift through that really as an adolescent kid, and so did my younger sister, and move on with it. And I don't know what was worse, trying to navigate the fallout from that, or trying to navigate the fallout from that coupled with the guilt of blaming myself for my dad's death. But it was difficult. Someone in the back green room said, you're heavily involved with Teen Challenge. Did you ever go to the facility? I'm like, no, but it's shocking that I didn't.
Yeah, because a lot of because you talk about, by the way, the name of your book is called Deepwater.
Yeah.
How to Face Fatherlessness, Fill the Gap, and Be the Man God Made You to Be.
Yeah.
Because a part of your journey, you dealt with loneliness, depression, and you want to help others to deal with fatherlessness. Because we've got, I think about 20% of homes in Canada are fatherless, and 80% of those are led by women, where the children are 16 and under that are the primary parent. Now, by the way, there's some amazing single mothers doing.
Absolutely.
But you want to give some of the lessons that you, I guess, in some ways learned the hard way, even now as a dad. Yeah,
exactly. If you look at it, it's not just Canada, it's a pandemic. My wife and I travel a lot. I know you travel a lot. I've seen it in all over parts of Africa. I've seen it in Central America. The U.S. is rampant with fatherlessness. And when I look at what it's doing to our society, because kids are growing up with no sense of self-worth, especially young men. It's funny, my wife, when she read this, she said, you could insert motherlessness. You could literally swap this out as a young woman trying to navigate your self-worth in the absence of a father. And so I started to realize it's really about that family unit and kids growing up in a day and age where divorce is perfectly acceptable, it's normal, and kids have to navigate a broken home environment. And my girls are growing up in that environment, and it was difficult to see that was going to be the outcome for them. And so I see it as a real issue, one that the church is keenly aware of, but I don't know if it's necessarily equipped to battle it. And yet, if you take a dad, a spiritual leader, right, as designed by God, out of the home, you can't tell me that doesn't take an element of the cornerstone out of the home, right?
As we're closing, Jonathan, what would you say to the young people that maybe don't have a dad in the home and the single mother? Because there is hope. That's what you found.
Absolutely. For me, my book points you to this, but I talk about the relationship between God and Jesus. From the moment the dove descended from heaven when he was baptized and said, "This is my son in whom I'm well pleased," God has it in his design for us to understand fatherhood, a heavenly father, one that loves us, even if we don't have the right idea of what a father is, because a lot of us have had earthly, fallible, broken fathers who did the best they could. The point is, he's perfect, and we can turn to him. So that's the one thing that I would want people to take away, that even if you don't have that cornerstone, it doesn't mean it has to be a disadvantage. You actually have an advantage, which I talk about, and that is you can actually draw in closer to God, and you don't have anything getting in the way of that. You can really say, I've got the most perfect Father, my Heavenly Father. And so that's been powerful for me. In overcoming fatherlessness was to realize, okay, I'm not alone. And I went for so long and made so many mistakes thinking I was alone, and I'm not.
You're not alone, and that's the hope that we have.
Yeah.
Jonathan Lewis, thank you for coming and sharing. Jesus, of course.
Yeah.
Deep Water is the name of the book, and you speak a lot about how to be a good dad, a good father. It's important. And as you're watching the program today, maybe you're finding yourself in a situation. You're a single mom. You feel like it's not going well. You know what? You do the very best you can, and I think as a community of people, especially within the church, we need to surround those that are struggling in that whole area of trying to raise kids by themselves. I know, in our home, we have both parents there, and raising our kids, and that's a difficult task. It's the most important thing we could do on this earth. So if you just need some encouragement today, give our prayer lines a call, 1-866-273-4444. Somebody there that will encourage you on and cheer you on as you do this amazing work called being a parent. We'll be right back.
And I got to a place where I needed an out. And so I think God really allowed me to explore acting. And but in my heart, I just never wanted to pastor or do anything. I just want to be a normal guy.
What a gripping story with Jonathan Lewis. And you think about how your parents, their imperfections stamp on your life and your identity. So maybe they were critical, so you never feel like you're good enough, or maybe they were there but they weren't there, so you don't feel like you're worthy of attention, whatever. Like, we read into all that stuff, right? In our formative years. But then not to have your dad around at all, or mom around at all, that's so many people's stories of missing a parent.
Yeah, this story really hit home for me because I'm a dad of a 15-year-old son, and I can't imagine what it would how it would affect the trajectory of Lucas's life if something were to happen to me. And thinking about all those lessons yet to be taught that me as a father I desire to impart. And I can't tell you how many times I've prayed, Cheryl, God, please fill in the gaps where I fail miserably as a father. And that's one of the promises that we have, that he will be a father to the fatherless, right?
Yeah, and if you need to be reminded of that today, we would love to pray with you. So many of us are dealing with grief that we've never really processed, that maybe we can't get rid of. And prayer can do amazing things. Give us a call, 1-866-273-4444. It is why we are here, and we would love to be an encouragement and a resource for you.